welcome to Spell Less, Mean More. I'm your host, Iolanthe, and today I'm joined by Vix Maxwell, who is known to many of you as New Age Hipster. Welcome, Vix.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Now, this is the second in our podcast series, which supports 100 Days of Brave, and most specifically the first trimester of the book, which looks intimately at the process of intuition in business ideation. And Vix is incredibly well positioned to share her smarts about this aspect of creative development with us. So a bit of context. I came to know Vix through Instagram probably 4 or 5 years ago when I was getting on my first Oracle card jag with my very good friend Elle Steele, who has been featured on a previous podcast. And Vix, I'll include all of her Instagram handles in today's podcast, but she does these super fun, massively contemporary card readings, and they were really fun and really jolly. And we had a great time using our cards to do these readings. And over the years, I've observed as her business practice has developed, and I've noticed that she has, published formally with a publishing partner. She's gone into self-publishing herself, and she's built a substantial influencer platform on Instagram. So it's really wonderful, Vix, to have kind of witnessed that journey. And in a lot of ways, when you do witness somebody's journey to proficiency, it demystifies a lot of things.
Yeah. It was definitely didn't happen overnight.
And I really love the identifying that overnight miracles don't happen in publishing or business. It's something that you work towards, and that will probably be at the heart of today's discussion. So, Vix, I'd really love you to share, do you consider yourself a business person first or an intuitive first?
I love this question, and the truth is, I don't know that I've ever really considered myself a business person. Even now, I wouldn't introduce myself as, I'm a business person. I run my own business, but I kind of, when I was starting out, I had no idea what I was doing with business. I just felt this calling to do some readings and to sell some readings online. That was kind of, what the goal was at the beginning. Actually, the goal before that was just to be a blogger and just to share my blog about my own spiritual journey. And then it kind of grew into, maybe I'll try and do some readings for people and see what happens and see if anybody's interested in that. So my business journey really started with me putting some tarot readings on Etsy. And that was kind of me being a business owner. I was like, I'm going to do some readings on Etsy. And then it kind of slowly grew from there, and I started to get some repeat clients, and then people shared about my work, and it kind of went from there. But at the very beginning, when I was trying to kind of get myself out there, I was just Googling everything. I was like, how do you upload a video to YouTube? How do you use hashtags on Instagram? I didn't know any of this stuff. So, it was very much a process of, whenever something happened in my business, how do I pay my tax? How do I become a sole trader? What is all of this? It was like this constant sort of me watching a lot of YouTube videos, reading a lot of blog posts on how to run a business. So to describe myself as a business person kind of feels like, I don't know about that, but at the same time, I am, that is what I've become over time. But I would definitely describe myself. I think I'd describe myself actually as a creative first. Yes. Definitely an intuitive, because I feel like that's part of who I am, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's business or creativity or, whatever. I sort of feel more like if somebody asked me, are you a business person, are you intuitive or a creative? I'd probably say creative first, intuitive, and then business person. But at the same time, it kind of, you got to be all of that when you're running your own business, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's really one of the things that 100 Days of Brave, I guess, hopefully gives people a grounding in, is that when we first begin, just as you said, you're looking up YouTubes on how to upload videos to YouTube. You're looking up ATO advice on how to become a sole trader or a company, at the beginning, we are typically all under-resourced and we're typically looking for advice and nothing, after having done something for a number of years, it feels almost like it's an ease that we develop with our knowledge, but it's actually really hard won. So if anybody is feeling like, there are all these things they don't know about business or systems in relation to compliance, nobody knows it at the start. There's nothing natural about any of it, which is why it's kind of a mixture of graft and intuition. Vix, something I find really interesting, and I'm so looking forward to your insights on this, is that when it comes to business, like when you think of business, it's like, it sounds it's got this very masculine, heavy quality to its business. Like business looks a certain way, which is a load of rubbish. But often people who think about the right way to do business planning, they'll want to veer away from anything that is a soft skill, like a feeling about the success of a concept or a feeling about whether or not you should work with somebody. Why do you think that this world of business is so allergic to the more feminine, if you will, world of the soft skill of the intuitive?
That's such a great question. I think ultimately, the world that we live in, the capitalist world, just doesn't really value the the intuitive kind of way of being. It's all hustle, go, make more money, spend more money, make more money, spend more money. And it's kind of like, when do you have time to meditate? Like when are you giving yourself time for that? But I find it really interesting because I know, sometimes when you hear these like really successful business people speak, a lot of them, you hear people like these, people who are into financial trading, for example, and they'll be like, oh, I just knew, I just knew that I needed to sell, or I just knew that I needed to buy. It's like everyone's using their intuition. It's just that we're talking about it and we're calling it that. Whereas other people are just kind of, calling it something else, I think. But I do feel like there's starting to become, people like us, like we're creating that change, right? Like we're having these conversations and reminding people who are in business or wanting to get into business that it doesn't always have to be like that. Like it doesn't, actually doesn't serve you. And as someone who's been in business for about 8 years now, I've had my fair share of hustling and burnout. And I know that it's like, it's not always the best way to do it. And I have seen in the community as well, so many people start a business like over time. I've had loads of friends, people that I've connected with over the years, and they appear and they're like, I'm running this business, this spiritual business. I'm doing all of these things. I'm putting all this stuff out there. And then, a year or so later, they completely disappear and you never hear from them again. It's like, okay, like I wonder what happened there. And everyone has their reason for kind of going in a different direction. But yeah, it's such an interesting time because I feel like, I feel like all of this stuff has kind of like come from the Industrial Revolution. And then we had like in the 80s, greed is good and make more money and spend more money and it's good to be rich. And, everyone wanted a corporate job and all that stuff. And now I kind of feel like we've reached the peak and now we're kind of coming down the other side and everyone's exhausted and everyone's wondering what's the point of spending all of my time making all this money when I can't enjoy myself, and, all these questions that people are asking now. So yeah, I think we're at a very, very interesting time in, on the planet with all of that stuff. I don't even know if that answered your question, but hopefully it is.
Why some forms of intuition are regarded as more serious or more valid than others. And the example of the stockbroker was perfect because that stockbroker, like the stock market is a confidence game, just like any market, right? When humans all want to do something, there's confidence in that market, and so we all buy it. And but it's literally just a sense of confidence, and it's often unknowable. And we look to research to back up our hunches, I suppose. Now, I really like to know a couple of the tools that you use when you're wearing like your business or your creative hat, when you're focusing on your business or the way you serve your customers. What kind of intuitive tools do you use? Are there particular times of year that you find planning is useful with intuitive tools?
So tarot has always been massive for me, because that's kind of how I started. I was just kind of getting back into tarot before I started my business. I'd been into tarot for many, many years and kind of been a dabbler and constantly kind of, got the cards out and put them away and got them out, put them away again. And I kind of was just getting this nudge to like, why don't you get back into the tarot and see, I had a lot of questions. I was struggling with a lot of things at that time. And I just had this nudge to get the tarot deck back out. So I started to work with the tarot, and that was kind of, and still very much is, like one of my favorite tools for business and for life. Because anytime you're kind of at a crossroads and you're wondering what to do next, you get out your tarot deck and see. So it's interesting that I've kind of, tarot has been my tool, and then I've used tarot as, something to support other people in my business. But in terms of planning, tarot's kind of played a role in that. But I'm also, I work with the Wheel of the Year, but I kind of work with the Wheel of the Year in my own way. I don't necessarily do the traditional witchy kind of, it's in bulk, we've got to do X, Y, Z. I kind of go, okay, it's time to, the earth is moving. It's time to reflect on my journey and where I'm at. So every 3 months, I kind of sit down and revisit my goals and my intentions. Before the pandemic, like I was doing kind of like, what am I going to do this year? And I was planning like a year ahead. And now it's like, I can't plan more than 3 months ahead because I have no idea what's going to happen. But I think it's still really important to sit down and kind of reflect on where you are in business and where you want to be, and what changes do you need to make, and what goals are you working towards. So I kind of do this mix of celebrating the Sabbats in my witchy way, and then I also get out my notebook and I'm like, okay, going to set some goals and check in with my business at the same time. So so that works really well for me, and I think it's a really good time to do it, because they are traditionally points of reflection that humans have been using for thousands and thousands of years.
And for those who are listening today who are perhaps more hard business centric, I think that it's valuable to not put up walls around stuff that sounds woo-woo or that stuff that sounds foreign to your own experience. Because for somebody who is perhaps a little bit more esoteric in the way that they do their business planning, when they see you pull out your copy of like the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, they're probably also like, that these Tim Ferriss and esoteric in some ways, they're both sides of the same sphere, right? They're all about creating space for intention and working out the way that we want to best live our lives. So why it's been a focus for me to introduce you to people like Elle and like Vix is because I come from a hard business background. So my business does content for professional services. My business side is incredibly strong. Like I'm a very, focused businessy person, but I'm also quite woo-woo-y. I'm very much in my feminine self. But that doesn't mean that I'm irrational. It doesn't mean that I'm making decisions based on a variety of inputs. And the inputs that Vix is talking about here, they are just inputs. It doesn't mean that people who are using these inputs are slaves to fate.
Yes.
Like you're not making, when people, and I'm sure that you might have experienced this with clients who have wanted tarot readings from you, like the experience of using an intuitive tool, regardless of whether it's meditation or a physical, like an oracle card deck, they're just inputs, right?
Yeah, and I really love that you touched on that, because actually, the tarot has kind of this really, it's it's a lot of connotations connected with the tarot. And, you know, a lot of people think that it's about fortune telling. And it has been, and some people still use it to predict outcomes, you know, where is my business going to be in 6 months or whatever. But I don't even really do predictive readings anymore. I kind of started out doing that because that's the kind of traditional way of reading. But I, you know, I also very much believe in law of attraction and in our power to manifest and create what it is that we want and to take action and, you know, set those goals and work towards them. So I tend to use tarot more as like a kind of inner guidance system and an opportunity to kind of check in with, you know, what I would call my guides and angels, but my intuition, my inner knowing, you know, whatever it is, whatever that thing is that makes you know when to buy and when to sell, and you know, pull some cards on that. And the tarot for me is very much kind of, you know, it can be referred to as like a mirror to the soul, and it can just kind of show you what you're thinking and what's going on with you, and you know, show you things that maybe you're not focusing on or you're not aware of. And there's actually a lot of people that use tarot for business. And there's a lot of people that use tarot for business, not in a woo-woo way like I do, but a lot of people use it as a psychological tool because it's, you know, it's just a mirror. Like in each of the cards, there's, you know, things that happen to us in this life journey. So yeah, I love that you said that, because there's just, there's so much more to tarot than just, you know, doing a little fortune telling reading and telling someone, you know, when you're going to meet your soulmate. Like, it's so much more than that.
I use, as I go in the book, I use tools and a mixture of, you know, it just depends on where I'm at. Like, it could be oracle, it could be meditation, it could be physical movement. They're all forms of meditation, right? They're all forms of inquiry. And here, when I'm doing my business planning, I will typically do a 12-card spread where I take note of what 12 months represent. I might never revisit it again for that year, but then I'll look on it because I'm like, oh yeah, I can see what happened in April. But again, these are inputs. It doesn't mean that you're being a slave to woo-woo. It's a way of looking at yourself in the mirror and working out what your motivation is. So Vix is also a published author, and she also has a couple of editions of really beautiful oracle card products which have hit the market, and they're very beautiful. And in a recent podcast that I did in August, I addressed the process of becoming an author. I would really love to hear how you went about the process of writing your first book. Was it published? Did you try with a publishing house? A bit of knowledge about how that worked out for you would be great.
Yeah. So, you know, as I was kind of like doing a bunch of these readings on Etsy, I was also writing my first fiction novel, and the dream at that time was, you know, I want my fiction to get out into the world, because I really, you know, I wanted to be a writer. So, you know, I was like, I'm gonna write a novel. I worked on that first novel that I wrote. It took me like 10 years to write it, but that's because I was doing a lot of other things at that time. I was working, before I had this job and started my business, I was a teacher. And so I was, you know, teaching full time, and then kind of finding other time to work on my business. And then if I had any moments spare, I'd be working on my novel. So the beginning of that process was really, you know, once I'd finished the first draft of once I finished what I thought was the final draft of the novel, I started reaching out to agents and publishers. And this was like many, many years ago now. But I sent it to about 100 different agents and publishers. And I had 2 requests a full book, which was very exciting. And I was like, it's happening. And then they rejected it at the end of that. So, you know, like 100 rejections was kind of like, okay, like I've got an option here to either just decide this isn't going to happen and put the book away. And actually, really interestingly, I had a few tarot readings at that time from a few different readers, and they all said to me, like, give it up, like give up fiction writing, because It's not like maybe just do it as a hobby, do it as something for just for you, but no, you know, it's not going to do anything. And I was like, what? I don't think so. So I ended up self-publishing, partly just because I was like, the idea of putting this book in a box and like nobody ever gets to see it was kind of like, just didn't sit well with me. So, you know, and there's an example of, you can use your tarot cards, you can read them and they can tell you all this great stuff, but you still have the choice of what you want to do with that information. So yeah, I was like, you know what, I'm going to self-publish. So I went through the process then of, I worked with a whole bunch of beta readers. I got a whole bunch of people to read the book before I self-published, just to get, you know, final feedback, and to kind of, really what I wanted to do was figure out if it was actually any good. And like, am I just like, is it going to be embarrassing if I put this out into the world? So I worked with a bunch of people, and it was great. And there were lots of things that they helped me with to make it even better. And so I just worked really hard on the getting the cover in the right shape and size for Amazon, and all of this stuff that you don't realize is, you know, once again, you're on YouTube, how do I format a book cover for Amazon? All of this stuff. So I put it up, and it was kind of really exciting to see people actually read it and enjoy it. And, you know, it didn't become a New York Times bestseller, but it was loved by a lot of people. And I was like, this is really exciting. So I went on to write 2 more novels. And so now there's a whole series of that. That book is part of a series called Santolsa Saga. And for anyone who's interested, it's a young adult. It's time travel, it's romance, it's got witchy aspects, it's got, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And in between that, I also published with HarperCollins my first witchy book called Witch Please, Empowerment and Enlightenment for the Modern Mystic. And that was a really interesting story, how that came about. Because basically I just got an email one day from HarperCollins, and they said, hey, we're interested in writing a book with you on magic and witchcraft. And I was like, okay, let's chat. So we had a chat and we wrote a book. Well, I wrote a book, and, you know, they did design the cover and everything. And so, you know, I'd written and self-published this novel. I think I've written and self-published the first 2 novels, and then we did Witch Please. And then I did the final novel, and then I published my first Oracle deck with Rockpool. And now we've got the second Oracle deck coming out really soon in October this year. So it's been a really interesting, journey to, you know, have this kind of like self-publishing fiction thing going on, and then to also have this like traditionally published spiritual stuff. It's been really interesting, and not kind of what most people do. So that's kind of my story of you know, how it happened.
Would you say that your day in, day out commitment to New Age Hipster, which is like, you know, website and the readings and your Instagram profile, plus the relentlessness of your desire to publish, do you think, I mean, it seems obvious to me, but do you think that commitment is what led to that email from HarperCollins?
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, I feel like there's some really interesting information out there about, you know, how to get published as a spiritual or a nonfiction author. Like, a lot of people will tell you, well, you have to have a big following, you have to have a platform, like you have to have be seen in some way. And there's like a real trend now that I'm seeing where it's like, unless you've got like, you know, people are saying, unless you've got like 100 million views on TikTok, there's no point in even trying to get a book deal, because they're not interested in like nobodies or whatever. But, you know, having said that, like, my platform is a lot smaller than a lot of people who are struggling to get book deals. So I think it's, I really think it's about it's about showing up and doing the work and just kind of being in the right place at the right time. Like, a lot of it is luck, and it's like, I don't know how HarperCollins found me that day. I don't know what hashtags they were looking at, or, you know, did they find me because they went to someone else's account and someone else had a post about me, or were they Googling on, you know, did they find one of my blog posts? I don't even really know how it happened. I probably should have asked them. But, you know, somehow they found me. But I had actually been thinking, like, before that happened, I had actually been in a place where I was thinking about writing a book, a spiritual book, and self-publishing it if nobody wanted it. I was kind of going to go back through the process of writing the nonfiction book, and then trying to find an agent or a publisher for it. And then if I couldn't, I was going to kind of go down the self-publishing path for my nonfiction stuff as well. That was kind of what I was thinking. So if I hadn't got that email from HarperCollins and I hadn't gone down that route, I still would have got my book, whatever the book was going to be. I still would have got it out in the world in some way. And I think what's really beautiful about the world right now is that you can do that. And there are so many books that are self-published that a lot of people wouldn't even know that it was self-published, because they're beautifully written. They've been edited like to professional standard. They got beautiful covers, great content, loads of like, you know, people are talking about it on socials. People are, you know, got amazing reviews on Amazon and whatever. Like, there's really no difference. It's like you can get your work out into the world in whatever way you need to. So I would definitely, personally, what I would suggest is, like, take your work to a traditional publisher first, if that's what you want to do, because some people don't even want to do that and they just want to go their own way, which I totally get. But if you're interested in doing that, you know, do what I did, put it out there, see if anyone's interested. And if they're not, publish it anyway, because, you know, if you feel like the world needs this book for some reason, then it probably does. And, you know, trust your intuition and go for it.
And so much of success in business, or regardless of what your output is, whether it's serving clients with a particular professional service, or whether it's making cakes, or whether it's, you know, writing books, so much of it is just about that relentless turning up. There are so many pretty mediocre businesses out there that are the result of really turning up day in, day out, because after a while it's like like you're just there, and more people will do you. So I think that what you shared about your journey in both publishing and in publishing, like, they dovetail really beautifully together. I've found through my exploration of self-publishing and publishing that sometimes people feel like self-publishing is like is going to be like. Sometimes people feel like it will be somehow a less onerous or less expensive process, or they feel that traditional publishing is like cost-free apart from that. Neither of those things are true, are they, Vix?
Yeah. Yeah, it was really kind of, I mean, you can spend a lot of money self-publishing. In my experience, I would have to say that getting traditionally published is so much easier. Like, it's so much easier. It's different, but there's pros and cons to doing it each way. So when you're working with a publishing house, it's easier in the sense that you just, you know, you write the manuscript and you send it to them and they can take care of everything. But then you have this whole situation of, well, then you've got to go through the editing process and someone has to read what you've written and tell you what they think. So then it's like, okay, now we have to do some edits because, you know, they didn't like this bit or this bit didn't make sense or whatever. You know, and that's like, okay, you got to deal with the rewrites, and there may be things as well. I was pretty lucky with Witch Please that there wasn't a huge amount of rewriting, but you know, there were still things that was kind of like, oh well, I really liked that. Like, why have you changed that? And you know, all of that kind of stuff. Whereas when you're self-publishing, you can say exactly what you want to say and put it out there, and there's no, you know, there's no one to tell you, you know, you got to change this or you got to change that. So yeah, there's pros and cons in that sense. And then of course you have, like, you know, the design elements with the traditional publisher. Like when they sent me through the cover for Witch Please, it was like, oh, here's what the cover's going to look like. There was no, do you like this cover? Do you want it, you know, do you still, what do you think of this? It's just like, this is it. Like, this is what's going to look like. This is how it's happening. And, you know, luckily it was cool and I liked it. But, you know, I know a lot of people who've been traditionally published who've really struggled with some of that stuff where, you know, they didn't like the title. I didn't like the title of Witch Please when they first said we want to call it Witch Please. I was like, really? But now it's grown on me and, you know, people have really resonated with it because it is kind of, you know, modern and fun. But yeah, there's a lot of things that you just don't get control of. But at the same time, when you self-publish, yes, you have control over everything that goes in the book. You have control over the cover. You have control over, you know, what's written about it on Amazon, all of that stuff. But you do have to do it all yourself. And I found it a real challenge to learn how to format a book, to learn how to do the cover for a book, to upload it on Amazon. Then you have to work out how to get anybody to see it on Amazon. I went through, I do a lot of Amazon ads from my fiction, because like people just don't see it otherwise. So then you've got to learn how to run ads. So yeah, there's like a whole, you know, it's like a whole different world, but you know, your books kind of end up next to each other on the shelf or the, you know, virtual shelf on Amazon or whatever, but it's like a kind of completely different experience. But I think it really depends on, you know, who you are and what you want to do and, you know, how you want your book to get out into the world and how precious you want to be about it. But also one of the great things that I love about self-publishing is there's no kind of waiting period as well. So with traditional publishing, you know, sometimes it's like a year. I know with the Goddesses Among Us deck, it was finished ages ago. Like, you know, this time last year, we'd already finished it. And now it's like, oh, now it's coming out. And it's like, oh, I almost forgotten that I even wrote or created that. And now everyone's getting excited about it. Like, oh, it's this brand new thing. And I'm like, oh, that's old news. Like, I'm already working on the next thing over here. So yeah, whereas when it's self-publishing, it's like, as soon as it's ready, you just upload it and you can, you know, send it out into the world. So yeah, I really think there's pros and cons for both. And I don't think it's necessarily an easy choice to decide which path is right for you. But like you said, yeah, it can be expensive. And one of the things that I didn't do